I feel like we're in a negative space here, Jeff, a lot lately, and some of it is warranted, a lot of the layoffs and so on and so forth. But now I'm starting to see things like, I guess it's actually related, if you think about it, specifically to the layoffs point. This idea of what to do if you lose your champion at your customer. This is inspired a couple of the folks I saw talking about it. Of course, there are more. Daphne Costa Lopez and Ali Cudby. My initial question for you is, how do you think about customer champions? Are they sort of the alpha and the omega that people position them to be?
At the end of the day, business is all about getting work done through people. We aren't to the point of the world where blockchain is running everything, everything is automated. Work is done through people, it's done through relationships. And I think we're at one of those moments where it's critical that you have the relationships at your customers because you are seeing layoffs, which naturally means that at some point or another, there's risk that your champion is leaving the business. And so I do think we're at a critical moment. I think you have to prioritize relationships, but I think the thing that I keep coming back to is, everybody tries to come up with the new something new. How do I go after different relationships? And I just come back to like the tried and true of like, you got to get high and wide, right? You have to have more than one relationship at your customer. Doesn't matter which way you slice it. You just need more than one. And, an effective way to make sure your CSM or your teams have more than one relationship is to track it or make sure in a spreadsheet somewhere you have a number that says, how many do you have at this customer? And I think sometimes we just get overcomplicated, right? We're thinking about, oh my gosh, what's the level of relationship that we have? What's the strength of that? Which departments are they in? Where are they in the organization, right? We start to just overcomplicate things to a point because we like to collect data and then we become data hoarders, and then the data becomes old, and then eventually we're going to say, well, it's not fresh, and then I can't send the contract to the right person. And so I don't know, I'm all about like speed and simplicity when it comes to that stuff, but I think it's important right now.
Or how about collecting so much data that you don't get anything else done?
That too, yeah, right.
Or you don't do anything with that data?
Yeah. Then you're asking
Yeah.
your team, and then it's like, hey, Dylan, do you mind spending 3/4 of your day in Salesforce filling in fields rather than working with
Mm.
customers, getting stuff done, feeling like you're progressing? And so I think it's almost like you overprocess your team to death. So I don't know. I've tried to, when I start thinking about this, I always keep coming back to like, what are simple solutions, and how can we use technology like to our advantage? Again, I think what I've learned across my career is that in most cases, companies' data is too dirty to make anything really automated and to really use it to the advantage that people tell you. And so I always try to come
Mm.
back to what are simple, scalable ways to do something. And scalable, I think, also has a frame of reference that people misnomer, which is they think when they hear scalable, it means automated, it means tech first, it means all this stuff. Scalable can actually be a process that just helps your team get through doing this activity faster. Maybe it's that you streamline the process and that becomes more scalable for them to do. So I would say I think of like two things when it comes to relationships, though. One is actually from a friend of ours, Damian Howley, who I actually just posted about this morning. We talked about this on a podcast with him recently, but he talks about strategic, tactical, and operational. And those are just kind
Mm.
of levels of roles. And so he just said, I said, hey, what does your team do for relationships? And he just said, I like to just break it down. I don't necessarily need to know what that person's exact title is, but tell me which kind of role they play in their organization, and then let's just track it. And he's not asking for supreme notes or all this like level of detail. He just says anytime you have an interaction with them, let's just make sure we log it in some way. And then he's looking at kind of a dispersion. Are we spending too much time with the strategic and not enough time with the tactical? Do I even have relationships across those? He's just looking for one person across each of those, right? That I can kind of name and reference. So I just think that's pretty easy and simple for somebody to think about in a way that creates speed for them to do their job. That's the way I like to think about it, is like, I want to create bowling lanes. Like I want bumpers for people so that Dylan feels
Hmm.
like, hey, I
Hmm.
can go fast. I can do the things I can do because I know that there's bumpers. And if there's bumpers,
Yeah.
then man, we're going to be humming along this thing. And I think more often than not, what you find with process technology is that people overcomplicate it. Bumpers come down, and then it's like, cool, we got gutter balls for like 6 months in a row. That's not good.
I like that analogy. That makes the gutter ball drove it home for me, right? Because that's like you get no points
Yeah, you get nothing.
with when you put the guards up, you're almost guaranteed to get at least one pin,
Let's just come on.
right?
Let's at least got to bounce off one.
Couple of points. So everything you just said, if I'm a CSP, I just lost your phone number, so to speak, because you just cut them off at the knees with a lot of their value prop, so to speak. And I don't know if you did that on purpose. I don't think you're wrong either. Dirty data really messes up their a lot of their selling points, right? Because they're so much based off of data. And then the idea that scalability is not purely through technology, well, that's if they're a three-legged stool, that's the second leg. I don't even know what the third leg is. I guess it's pretty, but
Yeah.
they're they're not happy with you if they're listening to this, Jeff.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a time and a place, but
Sure.
I think more often than not, and again, I think like we sell technology, I sell a SaaS platform.
Yeah.
I believe in having technology, but I just think from our consulting days, I think what you see more often than not is companies aren't ready to adopt the technology because they haven't thought deeply enough about the process, they haven't thought deeply enough about their teams, and then you just kind of put on a band-aid solution, and then you proverbially get 6 months, 9 months, 10 months down the road, and they're still kind of in a similar spot, maybe just with a little bit more on top. And so yeah, definitely time and a place. I do think that simplicity drives to, hey, like even in some cases, like you can track that stuff in a spreadsheet yourself, as a CSM at the end of the day.
Well, so that's the other point I wanted to get back to is we started this off by talking about the champion. And you talked about this idea of high and wide, which is one you've talked about before, and I appreciate. You mentioned it. If nothing else, it lives in a spreadsheet, but you don't want to get bogged down with a ton of data. And some examples you gave are like the health of that specific relationship. My question to you would be, what does your spreadsheet look like? Is it 3 columns, name, email address, and red, yellow, green? Or is there a number of meetings? Is there a champion yes or no column? Like, what does it look like to you?
I'm going to assume I will count columns for like name, email, phone, but I don't really count those. So I'm going to
Yeah.
say mine's 3 columns. First one is what they care about. So what's for them, you got to know it's valuable in terms of
Got it.
what they
Mm-hmm.
purchased, why they purchased it. And it's not necessarily like what I want to try and get out of that question is what can we measure for them that would actually dictate it's valuable. And so if I can get that in a simple way in like 1 column, great, that's perfect. Second thing that I want to get is anything somewhat personal. You knew I was a Buffalo Bills fan. That was such a subtle nod to the Jim Kelly, right? Any little frame
Mm-hmm.
like that would be huge to a relationship. So I don't need to know kids' names. I don't need to know birthdays. I don't need that level of detail. I just need like what's something that they're passionate about. So how would I do that? A lot of times I ask people, hey, what's a great Sunday morning look like for you? Why do I ask that question?
Mm-hmm.
Because then they start to tell you something about their life that you wouldn't actually already know. So ask them something that's a little off the cuff. You learn something. Say, hey, did you do the Sunday crossword this week? I know you like to do that. Hey, that's a really nice subtle nod, builds the relationship. That's
Mm-hmm.
column number two. And then column number three for me would be something around relationship strength or something, or like last contacted, when's the last time I looked at them, just because I want frames of reference of like, oh, it's been a long time, oh, it's been a short time. So I would try and put that maybe into a red, yellow, green. I don't want to look at days so much. Maybe it is like 30, 60, 90 days out from when I last talked to them, but that would be like the third column that I put in there. But again, I think those are pretty simple. You keep track of those fairly easily.
I like that. A good CSP, you can do that very easily, right? I'm not selling CSPs here or denigrating them like Jeff, but